My name is Josephine Carter. I'm 29 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I would have described my life as predictable in the best possible way. I work in IT support for a regional hospital network. My days are structured, controlled. I wake up at 6, I'm at my desk by 8, and I'm usually home by 5:30. I like knowing how things work. I like systems that make sense. That includes relationships, or at least I thought it did. My boyfriend, Ethan Blake, is 27. We had been together for just over 2 years, and about 9 months ago, he moved into my apartment when his lease ended. It made sense at the time. The apartment is a 2-bedroom unit near downtown, close enough for me to walk to work, which I prefer. The lease is in my name, most of the furniture too. Ethan contributes to utilities, sends his share every month, and on paper, everything looked balanced. For most of our relationship, I would have described him as ambitious, driven, the kind of person who talks about next steps and bigger opportunities, like they're always just within reach. I respected that. I'm not flashy. I don't chase titles or status, but I am consistent, reliable, the kind of person who builds something slowly and keeps it standing. I thought we balanced each other. Looking back now, I think I was balancing him, because over the last few months, something in his tone started to shift. It wasn't obvious at first, just small comments. Observations, really. He'd mentioned how one of his coworkers was dating a guy with a better car, or how someone else had just gotten promoted and was now in a different league. He always said it casually, like he was just making conversation. But there was always this edge to it, like he wasn't just describing other people. He was measuring, comparing, and I was part of the equation. I addressed it early. I told him I didn't appreciate being compared to people I didn't know. He laughed it off, said I was being sensitive, that I needed thicker skin. I let it go, because at the time, it didn't feel like a pattern. It felt like noise. The real shift happened 3 weeks ago, Saturday night. We'd ordered takeout, watched a show, nothing unusual, nothing tense. From my perspective, it was a normal evening. Ethan went to take a shower, and I stayed on the couch scrolling through my phone. That's when it buzzed. A message from a mutual friend. Hey, is everything okay between you and Ethan? I remember staring at the screen for a second, confused. There hadn't been a fight. No tension that day, no reason for concern. So I asked what they meant. A few seconds later, they sent a screenshot. And that was the moment everything snapped into focus. It was Ethan's Facebook profile. His relationship status had been changed. Not to single, not to anything clear, but to a custom line that read, relationship status, settling until something better comes along. There was a laughing emoji at the end. Like that made it harmless. Like that made it a joke. At first, I genuinely thought, maybe I was missing context. An inside joke. Something between him and his friends that I just wasn't part of. Then I looked at the comments. Know your worth. Don't let a mediocre situation hold you back. Facts. One of his coworkers, someone I had met once, commented that. Ethan had replied with a heart. Another person asked if he was talking about me. Ethan responded with a shrug emoji. And then, just keeping my options open, I didn't feel anger. Not immediately. It was more like a drop. A quiet, heavy realization settling into place. I took a screenshot, not out of impulse, out of instinct. Then I put my phone down, and I waited. Because I knew something about Ethan. He's very good at reframing things. Turning situations around until you're the one defending yourself. You're being dramatic. You're overthinking. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. I didn't want to walk into that unprepared. So I waited until he came out of the shower. He walked into the living room like nothing had happened, towel around his neck, scrolling through his phone, completely at ease. I watched him for a second, trying to match the person in front of me, with the person in that screenshot. They didn't feel the same. Hey, I said finally, I got a message from someone. He didn't look up. About what? I kept my voice even. Your relationship status. That got his attention. Barely. He glanced at me, then back at his phone. Oh, that? He said. It's just a joke. Relax. Just a joke. I let that sit in the air for a second. The joke, I said slowly, is that you're publicly saying you're settling for me. He sighed. Actually sighed. Like I was exhausting him. You're taking it too seriously, he said. People post stuff like that all the time. I studied his face. There was no hesitation. No awareness of what he had actually done. Your coworkers are commenting on it, I said, agreeing with it. He shrugged. So? Something in my chest tightened. Not sharp. Just final. So, I repeated. Are you saying you agree with it? He rolled his eyes. God, Joe, you're proving my point right now. What point? that I don't want to be with someone who takes everything personally. I blinked at him, and for a second I almost laughed, because the shift was so clean, so effortless. From him humiliating me to me being the problem. I'm not asking about everything, I said quietly. I'm asking about this. He set his phone down, finally giving me his full attention. And that's when his tone changed. Not defensive, not apologetic, evaluative, like he was reviewing something. You've gotten comfortable, he said. The words landed heavier than I expected. Comfortable? I repeated. Yeah, he said. Your life is stable, which is fine, but it's not exactly inspiring. I felt something go very still inside me. He kept going. You don't push yourself. You don't really level up. And I'm at a point where I'm thinking about where I'm headed. And I'm not part of that? I asked. He tilted his head slightly. Not like that, he said. I'm just saying, I'm young. I don't want to lock myself into something that feels average. Average. That word. It didn't hurt the way it should have. It clarified. I looked at him carefully. So when you say you're settling, I said, you mean it. He shrugged again. I mean, I'm not going to settle forever, he said. At least I'm being honest. It's not like I'm cheating. And then he smiled, like he had just made a reasonable point, like he had done something admirable. That was the moment. The exact moment everything shifted, because suddenly the last few months made sense. The comments, the comparisons, the way he would pull away from things that mattered to me, but show up fully for anything that might benefit him. It wasn't random. It was strategy. And I wasn't his partner. I was his placeholder. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly. Okay, I said. He frowned slightly. Okay, he repeated. I need some air, I said, standing up. I grabbed my keys and walked out. No drama. No slamming doors. Just distance. Because I needed to think. And more importantly, I needed to decide. I walked around the block longer than I needed to. Not because I was trying to calm down, but because I was trying to be sure. The air was colder than I expected, sharp enough to make my eyes water a little, and for a moment I let myself pretend that was the reason my vision felt unfocused. But it wasn't confusion. It was clarity arriving too fast. Every step I took, pieces of the last few months started rearranging themselves into something more coherent. The comments about his coworkers' boyfriends, the way he would suddenly be too tired to come to my work events, but somehow had endless energy for networking mixers and late-night drinks with people who could open doors. The time he joked, half laughing, half serious, that if he ever met a startup founder early, he'd lock that down before everyone else noticed. At the time, I smiled, told myself he was just ambitious. Now it felt different. Now it felt like shopping, and I had been sitting on the shelf. By the time I got back to the apartment, I wasn't angry. I was organized. Ethan was on the couch, exactly where I left him, phone in hand, scrolling through stories like nothing had happened. I stood there for a second watching him. There was something surreal about it. How someone could say something that fundamentally changes the nature of a relationship and then go right back to scrolling like it was background noise. I sat down across from him. I'm not okay with what you posted, I said calmly. He didn't even look up right away. You're still on that? He muttered. Yes, I said, because it matters. He sighed again, louder this time, like he was being dragged into something tedious. Joe, it's not that deep, he said. Everyone settles to some degree. That's just how relationships work. I let that sit. Settling, I repeated slowly, is not the same as choosing. He finally looked at me, and there it was again. That same expression, evaluating. Well, maybe if you had more drive, he said, I wouldn't feel like I was settling. There was a time when that sentence would have hit me, would have made me question myself. Wonder if I wasn't doing enough, being enough. But in that moment, it didn't. It just confirmed something. I leaned back slightly, studying him like I was looking at a stranger. Do you want to break up? I asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. What? No, he said quickly. Why would I want that? I held his gaze. You just told me you feel like you're settling. He shrugged, like that wasn't contradictory. That doesn't mean I want to leave, he said. You're stable. You're good to me. I like living here. There it was. Not love. Not partnership. Convenience. He continued almost casually. I just don't want to feel stuck. That word again. Stuck. Like I was something holding him back instead of someone standing beside him. I nodded once, slowly. If you believe you're settling, I said, you're free to leave. I'm not holding you here. He didn't respond. Not really. He just looked irritated, like I was making things unnecessarily complicated. That night, I didn't touch him. Didn't argue. Didn't try to fix anything. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling, not replaying the argument, but mapping out the situation, logistically. Because once the emotion is stripped away, what's left is structure. And structure is something I understand. The lease is in my name. The utilities are in my name. The internet, the streaming services, everything. He transfers his portion each month. There are no shared accounts, no pets, no joint investments, nothing that would trap either of us, which meant something very simple. This wasn't complicated. It just felt like it. The next morning, Ethan kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work, like nothing had changed. That was the moment I realized. He thought this would pass. He thought I would absorb it, adjust around it, like I had adjusted around every small comment before. I didn't say anything as he left. I just watched the door close behind him, and then I got up, got ready, went to work, like any other Monday, except it wasn't. Because this time I wasn't thinking about how to fix the relationship. During my lunch break, I checked his profile again. The post was still there. More comments now. More people engaging. One of his friends had written, "Are you manifesting an upgrade?" Ethan replied with, "Never close doors too early." I stared at that line longer than I should have. Not because it hurt, but because it was so deliberate, so intentional. He wasn't joking. He was curating. And people were watching, encouraging, validating. That was the moment the last bit of hesitation disappeared. I didn't text him, didn't confront him again. I opened my own profile, and I changed one line, a relationship status, no longer settling. No emojis, no explanation, no tags, just correction. Within 10 minutes, my phone started buzzing. Messages from mutual friends. "What's going on? Are you guys okay?" I responded the same way to everyone. "Ethan and I are reassessing." Neutral. Factual. No drama. No accusations. Then I made a call. My landlord. Not because I needed to ask permission, but because I wanted everything clear. Since the lease is solely in my name, I asked, what's the proper process if a cohabiting partner needs to move out? He confirmed exactly what I already knew. I had the right to end the living arrangement. I just needed to give reasonable notice. Reasonable. That word mattered. I wasn't trying to punish Ethan. I was just aligning reality with what he had already declared. I spent the rest of my lunch break reviewing everything. Utilities, mine. Internet, mine. Furniture, mostly mine. The few things he brought could be easily separated. There was no mess to untangle, just a decision to execute. By the time I got home that evening, I felt something I hadn't expected. Calm, not forced calm, not suppression, just clarity. About an hour later, the door opened. Ethan walked in, dropped his bag, and immediately looked at me. "You updated your status?" he asked. No greeting, no hesitation, just accusation. I met his eyes. "Yes," I said. "What's your problem?" he snapped. I tilted my head slightly. "I'm being honest," I said, "just like you." His jaw tightened. "That's not the same thing," he said. "It is," I replied calmly. "If you're settling, then so am I. And I'm no longer interested in that." He let out a short, sharp laugh. "This is petty," he said. "You're trying to embarrass me." I didn't react. "You introduced the concept publicly," I said. I responded. He stepped closer, frustration building. "Are you seriously breaking up with me over a joke?" I held his gaze. "I'm ending this," I said, because of what the joke revealed. That stopped him for a second. Just a second. Then the arrogance came back. "You're going to regret this," he said. "You're throwing away something stable because of your ego." "Stability without respect isn't worth keeping," I replied. The silence that followed was different. He was waiting for me to soften, to walk it back. I didn't. Instead, I said something simple. "You have 24 hours to pack your essentials and find somewhere else to stay." His expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. "Wait," he said. "You're serious?" "I don't make housing decisions as a bluff," I said evenly. I explained it clearly. "The lease is in my name. The utilities are in my name. He has income, savings, options. I would box the rest of his belongings carefully and coordinate a pickup. But he would not be staying here." He stared at me like I had just said something in a language he didn't understand. For a moment I thought, maybe now he'll realize. Maybe now he'll shift. But instead, he laughed. Sharper this time. "Wow," he said. "You're really doing this." "Yes," I said. He tried to pivot. "This is extreme," he said. "Normal couples fight and move on." "This isn't about dishes or schedules," I replied. "This is about how you define this relationship." Then came the shift. From dismissal to inconvenience. "I can't just find somewhere in 24 hours, he said. "I'm not asking you to sign a lease overnight," I said. "Call a friend. Book a short-term place. Stay with family." I paused. You have options. That's when his tone changed again. This time, it turned sharp. Mean. "Oh, you're not going to do better than me," he said. "You know that, right?" I didn't respond. He kept going. "Women like me don't stay single long," he added. "You're throwing away someone out of your league." I let him finish. Didn't interrupt. Didn't react. And when he was done, I said quietly, "Anyone who thinks they're out of my league is free to leave it." That landed. I could see it. But he covered it quickly with a scoff. I repeated the timeline. "Tomorrow evening," I said. "Pack what you need. I'll sleep in the second bedroom tonight. We'll keep things minimal." He accused me of trying to control the narrative. I shook my head slightly. "There is no narrative," I said. "There's just a consequence." Around midnight, I heard him on the phone. Fragments of conversation through the wall. "This is insane. She's overreacting. She's being controlling." I noticed something. He never mentioned the post. Not once. I didn't correct it. Didn't defend myself. I had the screenshots. I had the truth. That was enough. By morning, the process had already started. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt completely steady. By morning, the apartment already felt different. Not empty. Not yet. But shifted. Like something invisible had been removed, and the space hadn't quite adjusted to the absence. Ethan moved slower than usual, opening drawers, closing them, standing in the middle of the room like he had forgotten what he came there to do. For someone who always had a plan, it was the first time I'd seen him hesitate. "You're really serious about this," he said at one point, not looking at me. It wasn't a question. I folded a stack of his shirts neatly and placed them into one of the suitcases. "Yes," I said. He exhaled sharply through his nose. "This is insane," he muttered. "All of this, over a post." I didn't respond, because it wasn't about the post, and I wasn't going to explain that again. He tried anyway, circling back, pushing. "You're acting like I cheated," he said, "like I did something unforgivable." I zipped the suitcase and set it aside. "You told the truth," I said calmly, "and I believed you." That seemed to irritate him more than anything else, because there was nothing to argue against. No accusation. No exaggeration. Just acceptance. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. "That's not what I meant," he said. "Then what did you mean?" I asked. He opened his mouth, paused, closed it again. And in that brief silence, I saw it. The crack. Small, but real. Because for the first time, he didn't have a clean way to reframe it. Instead, he shifted tactics. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "People post stupid things all the time. It doesn't mean anything." I met his eyes. "You doubled down in the comments," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. He looked away first. That was all the confirmation I needed. The rest of the morning passed in a kind of quiet tension. He packed slowly, deliberately, like he was waiting for me to interrupt, to say something, to soften. I didn't. I stayed consistent, answering logistical questions when needed. Nothing more. At one point, he tried again. "You don't have to do this," he said, leaning against the doorway. "We can just move past it." I looked up from the box I was labeling. "Can you move past it?" I asked. He hesitated. And that was enough. Because even now, he wasn't saying he didn't believe it. He was just saying we could ignore it. "I'm not interested in pretending," I said. That ended the conversation. Around noon, I heard his phone ringing constantly. Voices filtering through as he stepped out onto the balcony. Fragments again. "She's kicking me out." "It's not like that. She's just overreacting." The same pattern. Same narrative. Missing one key detail. I didn't correct it, because the people who mattered would ask. And when they did, I would answer. Simply, factually, without emotion. By late afternoon, 2 suitcases were packed. A few tote bags lined up near the door. He stood there for a moment, looking at them like they didn't belong to him. Like this wasn't actually happening. "This is a mistake," he said finally. I didn't respond. "You're going to text me in a week," he added, apologizing. I closed the box I was working on and taped it shut. "No," I said quietly. "I won't." Something flickered across his face then. Not anger. Not exactly. Something closer to uncertainty. But it disappeared quickly, replaced by that familiar edge. "Fine," he said. "Do what you want." Around 5, a car pulled up outside. One of his friends. I recognized her from a few group events. She stayed in the driver's seat, but I could feel her watching, waiting. Ethan grabbed his bags, then paused near the door, like he expected something. A scene. A reaction. Closure. I picked up the larger suitcase and walked it out with him. Not to be kind, just to keep things moving. The hallway was quiet. The elevator ride was silent. Outside, the air felt heavier than it had the night before. His friend glanced at me briefly, then looked away quickly. like she wasn't sure where to place her attention. Ethan loaded his bags into the trunk, then turned back to me. "This isn't over," he said. I held his gaze. "It is for me," I replied. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then got into the car. And just like that, he was gone. No shouting, no dramatic ending, just absence. I stood there for a moment after the car pulled away, not waiting, just registering. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and leaned against it for a second. The silence was immediate, thick, but not uncomfortable, different. I walked into the living room, looked around. Nothing had changed physically, but everything felt settled, like the tension that had been sitting quietly in the background for months had finally lifted. The first thing I did was start gathering the rest of his things. Not emotionally, systematically. Clothes from the closet, shoes from the hallway, toiletries from the bathroom. I separated everything carefully, labeled each box, took photos of the contents. Not because I expected a fight, but because I preferred documentation over assumptions. By the time I finished, the apartment looked cleaner, not emptier. Cleaner. I changed the Wi-Fi password, logged out of every streaming account, removed his devices from the network. Small things, but intentional. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, picked up my phone, and blocked his number. Not muted, not archived, blocked. A clean line. Within minutes, I saw missed calls attempt to come through before the block fully took effect. Then a message from an unknown number. It was him. Blocking me is childish. Adults communicate. I stared at the screen for a second, then blocked that number too, because there was nothing left to communicate. He had already said everything that mattered. That evening, I sent one final email. Short, clear, logistical. You can pick up the remaining boxes Saturday between 12 and 2. They will be left with the front desk. Any further contact should be limited to mail or outstanding bills. No emotion, no explanation, just closure. Saturday came quickly. I stacked all the boxes neatly by the door Friday night, made a simple inventory list. Shoes, dresses, kitchen items he brought. Everything accounted for. At 11:30, the concierge texted to confirm he had called ahead. I replied with instructions. Clear, simple. At 12:15, I received an email. You're being cold. After 2 years, I deserve a conversation. I read it once, then closed it. Because conversations are for things that aren't already clear. This was clear. From the window, I saw his car pull up. Same friend driving. Same quiet tension. I stayed upstairs. I heard the elevator. Muted voices in the hallway. Boxes being moved. Then silence. 10 minutes later, it was done. At 1:45, another email came through. Less composed this time. You're trying to humiliate me. People are asking questions. Your status makes me look bad. That part almost made me smile. Not out of spite, but because of how predictable it was. I replied once. Briefly, I didn't insult you publicly. I didn't share screenshots. I didn't comment on your character. I corrected my own status. If that makes you uncomfortable, it's because of what you posted first. I paused, then added one more line. Do not contact me again unless it concerns mail or bills. I hit send, archived the conversation, set a filter, and just like that, the noise was contained. By Sunday morning, the apartment felt completely different. His side of the closet, empty. The bathroom shelf, clear. No background tension. No subtle evaluation. No sense of being observed. For the first time in months, the space felt like mine again. And the most surprising part? I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt relieved. By Monday, the quiet didn't last. Not externally. Because even when you choose silence, people don't. They fill it. Usually with whatever version of the story reaches them first. I was at my desk halfway through a routine ticket when my phone buzzed. A call from a mutual friend from college. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. Hey, he said carefully. Can I ask you something? I already knew what was coming. Sure, I said. There was a brief pause. Then, did you really kick Ethan out over a Facebook status? The wording told me everything. Simplified. Stripped down. Reframed. I leaned back slightly in my chair, staring at the ceiling for a second before answering. He publicly described our relationship as him settling until something better came along, I said evenly. I told him if that's how he felt, he was free to find better. I chose not to stay in that position. Silence. A longer one this time. Then, that's not what he said. I figured, I replied. Another pause. Then a quiet, yeah, okay, that makes more sense. We ended the call shortly after that. No argument, no defense. Just correction. That became the pattern. Over the next few days, messages came in one by one. Different people. Same tone. Curious. Careful. like they were trying to piece together something that didn't quite add up. And every time I did the same thing. I didn't rant, didn't vent, didn't explain beyond what was necessary. I just sent the screenshot. The original post, and one of his replies, keeping my options open. No commentary, no interpretation. And almost every time the response was the same. A pause. Then, oh, that one word carried everything. Understanding. Recalibration. Silence. I never posted the screenshots publicly. Never tagged him. Never tried to win anything online. Because this wasn't a public performance for me. It was a private decision. And I wasn't going to turn it into something else. Ethan, on the other hand, he leaned into it. A few days after he left, someone sent me a screenshot of his new post. It was vague, carefully worded. Some people can't handle being challenged. They mistake growth for disrespect. There were plenty of comments underneath. Supportive, encouraging, people agreeing with him, framing him as someone who had outgrown something, limiting. I read it once, saved it, and closed the app. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't require a response. He was building a narrative. I was maintaining reality. There's a difference. Later that evening, an unknown number called. Twice. I didn't answer. A voicemail came through. It was his voice. Different this time. Less sharp. More controlled. Joe, I think we should talk. This got blown out of proportion. I listened to the message once, then deleted it. No response. No engagement. Because again, there was nothing left to clarify. 2 days later, another message came through. New number. Same pattern. But this time, softer. I miss what we had. I think we both handled things badly. I stared at that one a little longer. Not because I was tempted, but because of how precise it was. Both. Shared responsibility. Shared blame. A subtle rewrite of events. I set the phone down. Thought about it for a moment. Then picked it back up and blocked the number. Because there's a difference between a mistake and a mindset. A mistake is something you say, regret immediately, and try to fix. A mindset is something you defend. Something you reinforce. Something you believe enough to say out loud. More than once. Ethan didn't slip. He revealed. And I had responded accordingly. A few days after that, I noticed something else. His original post. Gone. Deleted. Replaced with something simpler. His relationship status now just said, single. No commentary. No jokes. No emojis. Clean. Neutral. Like none of it had happened. But deleting something doesn't erase the belief behind it. It just removes the evidence. By then, though, it didn't matter. Because the most unexpected part of all of this wasn't the fallout. It was what came after. The quiet. The absence of tension. The way my apartment felt when I walked into it after work. Lighter. Like I wasn't being measured anymore. Like I wasn't unconsciously adjusting myself to fit into someone else's expectations. I started sleeping better. Waking up without that low-level weight in my chest. At work, I focused more easily. Conversations felt simpler, cleaner, and somewhere in that shift, I realized something I hadn't fully acknowledged before. I had been auditioning. In my own relationship. Constantly. Proving. Adjusting. Trying to be enough in ways that were never clearly defined. Stable enough. Ambitious enough. Interesting enough. Without ever asking, enough for what? Enough for someone who was already looking elsewhere? That realization didn't hurt. It settled, like a final piece clicking into place. By the end of the week, another message came in. This time from his sister. Her tone was careful, measured. Hey, I heard what happened. Would you consider letting Ethan stay a few more days while he figures things out? I read it once, then checked his social media. Recent posts, photos, dinner, drinks, smiling. He wasn't stranded. He wasn't struggling. He was inconvenienced. I called her back. Kept my voice neutral. He had a full day to pack essentials, I said. He has savings, friends, options. I refunded his share of utilities. His belongings were returned safely. A pause. Then a quiet, he can be dramatic. That was the closest anyone had come to acknowledging reality. I'm not reconsidering, I said gently. She didn't argue. We ended the call shortly after. That night, I sat in my living room. No TV, no music, just stillness. And for the first time since everything happened, I noticed something clearly. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even thinking about him. I was just at peace. By the second week, everything had settled. Not just in the apartment, in me. There was no lingering tension, no urge to check his profile, no replaying conversations in my head, wondering if I could have handled things differently. Because I already knew the answer. I had handled it exactly the way it needed to be handled. Work felt lighter. I moved through my days without that quiet, constant awareness of being evaluated. Even small things felt different. Coming home, setting my keys down, walking into a space that didn't require emotional negotiation. It wasn't empty. It was mine. A mutual friend showed me his profile one afternoon. Not intentionally. We were out for coffee, and she hesitated before turning her phone toward me. "I thought you should see this," she said. I glanced down. Ethan, smiling. Seated across from a woman at a restaurant I recognized, one of those places he used to casually mention, the kind he implied I should have taken him to. The caption read something vague about alignment. Growth. Right timing. I looked at it for a few seconds, then handed the phone back. "That was fast," she said carefully. I shrugged. "And not really," I replied. Because it wasn't. It was just visible now. The pattern hadn't changed. The only difference was that I was no longer part of it. I didn't feel jealous. Didn't feel replaced. If anything, I felt confirmed. He hadn't been unsure. He had been searching. Positioning. And I had simply stepped out of the way. A few days later, I received one final email from him. I recognized the address immediately. For a moment, I considered not opening it. But I did. Not out of curiosity. Out of closure. The tone was different this time. No sharp edges. No defensiveness. Just reflection. "I've been thinking about everything," he wrote, "and I think I handled things badly." I read that line once, then continued. "I didn't expect you to actually leave. I thought we would argue, work through it. Most people don't just walk away like that." I paused there. That sentence. That was the center of it. Not regret. Expectation. He continued. "I guess I underestimated you. I didn't realize how serious you were." I leaned back slightly in my chair. Because it wasn't about seriousness. It was about belief. He had said something. I had believed him, and acted accordingly. That wasn't extreme. That was consistent. The email went on. More reflection. More soft language. Hints of something like regret, but not quite. Because even then, there was no real ownership of the core issue. Just surprise at the outcome. At the fact that I hadn't fought harder to stay. That I hadn't tried to prove my value. That I hadn't negotiated my place in his life. I closed the email. Didn't respond. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But because there was nothing left to say. The conversation had already happened. He said he was settling. I said I wasn't. And that was the end of it. Over the next few days, I noticed something else. The absence of noise. No more messages from unknown numbers. No more indirect posts. No more attempts to reframe the story. It was over. Completely. I rearranged the apartment that weekend. Moved the couch slightly. Cleared out the second bedroom properly. Not as a reaction. Not as a statement. Just because I could. Because the space was mine to shape again. And in that process, something else became clear. I wasn't rushing to replace anything. Not the relationship. Not the dynamic. Not even the presence of another person. I wasn't interested in filling the space. I was interested in keeping the peace. That surprised me more than anything. Because for a long time I had assumed that being alone would feel like loss. But it didn't. It felt like alignment. Like everything had clicked back into place in a way I hadn't realized was off. About a month after everything ended, I ran into someone we both knew. Casual conversation. Small talk. Then, inevitably, "So, what really happened between you and Ethan?" I didn't hesitate. "He said he was settling," I replied. "I chose not to be." That was it. No elaboration. No emotion. Just truth. They nodded slowly, like they understood more from that one sentence than they would have from a full explanation. And that was the thing. It really was that simple. Everything else, the posts, the arguments, the fallout, that was just noise around the core. A few days later, another message came through. Not from him. From someone who had heard versions of the story. "Do you regret it?" they asked. I read the message, thought about it, then typed back one word. No, because regret implies uncertainty, and there was none. If anything, there was relief. Relief in no longer being measured. Relief in no longer being an option someone was waiting to upgrade from. Relief in no longer trying to meet a standard that was never clearly defined. That was the real ending. Not dramatic, not loud, just clear. I didn't explode. I didn't drag him online. I didn't beg him to value me. I listened. I believed him. And I made a decision. I chose not to be someone's temporary solution, not their backup plan, not their good enough for now. And surprisingly, that choice didn't feel heavy.